Hey everybody, this is Ace from Samurai Pixel Cats. A few weeks ago, I was tagged by Brasel the Gamer here on YouTube to do a video about your top 5 most valuable NES games. So this is going to be me unscripted, so expect a bunch of jump cuts as I inevitably fumble over my words. So let's get this party started! So coming in at number 5 on this list, valued at $8.98, is Ghostbusters. So not much to say about this one other than it's not very good. I remember playing it a little bit as a kid, and now that I've gotten a little bit more information on it, I understand how to play it a little better. It's interesting, it feels like they were a little too ambitious, and it kind of feels like a Ghostbusters game should be. It's just executed poorly. Basically, you have to run around town, which is like a few city blocks of New York, randomly find places that have ghost activity and just go there and try and capture the ghosts for money. So you feel like, you know, the Ghostbusters at the beginning of the first movie, where they're running their business just catching random ghosts. And during this time, you can buy new equipment, upgrades, stuff like that to make catching ghosts better, or to make catching ghosts easier. But like I said, it's executed kind of poorly. Like, the controls aren't that great. You only go in with 2 Ghostbusters whenever you're catching regular ghosts, and you basically plop the trap down on the ground, and then you have to hit the B button to switch between each Ghostbuster, and you can kind of move them back and forth across the screen. It's funny because it feels like an old Atari game. Like the simplicity of the controls and just the way everything looks and feels, it feels like an Atari game. The only kind of bright spot in the game is the 8-bit version of Ray Parker Jr.'s Ghostbusters theme, which is funny because it doesn't even loop properly. It actually has the fade in at the very beginning with the chords going on before the actual song kicks in, and then at the end it fades out just like the real song. So it's almost like you remember on old Sega Saturn PlayStation games where they would compose a song and then have that as the background music, so you get the obvious loop point. So, I mean, like I said, overall the execution's not that great. It's not a very good game, but I mean, it's my 5th most valuable NES game. And before I go, one weird thing is the faster you go in the Ecto-1, the better gas mileage it gets. Coming in at number 4, valued at $10.02, is Smash TV, which I didn't even know they made on the NES until I found this at a flea market one day. So I actually like Smash TV. I'm a big fan of classic twin-stick shooters like Robotron 2084 and games like that. I actually have the arcade versions on a couple of Midway Classic Arcade compilation discs on the PS2. And they have both Smash TV and Total Carnage, which I actually like a little bit more because I like the more scrolling level design than just going from room to room. But on the NES, Smash TV is... It's okay. So really, it's only okay if you use both controllers for one player. Part of the problem with bringing a twin-stick shooter to an older console is there's really no way to simulate having both sticks. You have a D-pad and 2 buttons. So when you play with one controller, all you really get is movement for the D-pad, and I believe it's A to shoot. If you hold B, you can basically keep pointing in the direction you were pointing at when you pressed B, and keep shooting so you can kind of strafe that way.
Good luck. You won't need it.
There are options to do 1 player 2 controllers, and so I tried that out, and it's actually a little bit more comfortable than I expected, and I actually had the best run I've ever had in this game when I tried the dual controller setup. I was a little worried because you know how you hold the controller horizontally where you have the D-pad on the left and the buttons on the right? I was wondering how they were going to handle having two controllers, one controller in each hand. And the interesting thing is they actually rotate the D-pads to compensate for this. So you hold both controllers almost like the Joy-Cons for the Switch, where left on the D-pad is pointing up. So then you have your left hand, which is, I believe, controller 1 is movement, and then controller 2 is shoot, so you can shoot in whichever direction you do. It gets a little uncomfortable over time because, these old things didn't really take ergonomics into account. So rotating your thumbs over that really angular D-pad kind of gets uncomfortable after a while. But if you don't mind playing by yourself and you have two controllers, it controls just fine. It's pretty fun in short bursts, like most arcade games are. But if you want two players, you actually have to have a multi-tap and 4 controllers, 2 per person, to get the full arcade feel. Coming in the number 3 spot, just barely, at $10.04, is Excitebike. Specifically, the 5-screw version. So I'm actually kind of glad this one showed up on the list because I wanted to talk about this. It's something that it seems only recently collectors and collector sites are even differentiating, is the 5-screw versions of NES cartridges. And it seems like there's actually different listings when you look up values between the 5-screw and the 3-screw versions, or the normal versions. Basically, if you search for Excitebike, you'll get Excitebike, and then Excitebike 5-screw. So I found this kind of interesting because when Nintendo first came to America, what they did was they just took their Japanese circuit boards and repurposed them into the American standard. I believe the NES and the Famicom in Japan is a 60-pin connector, but for some reason the American one is 72 pins. So they had to basically upconvert them. And they actually had slightly better quality packaging. If you notice at the top here, there's no pins. And if you look at an older cartridge, there's these tabs right here, because that's basically what keeps the top up, because they got rid of the top 2 screws and then just kept these 3 screws here. Another interesting thing is these 3 screws you can basically take out with a flathead screwdriver. They didn't go with the weird hex security screw at the time. So it's kind of interesting because a lot of time these 5-screw versions are limited release, because as they started manufacturing more in America to save money, they put it down to 3 screws and put the tabs in the top. Anyway, on to the game. Excitebike is definitely a Nintendo classic. I never played much of the original Excitebike, but I do have Excitebike 64 on the N64, and I've always really enjoyed that. It was pretty interesting that even on the NES, it had a track editor, so you could create your own tracks and race them if you wanted. It's also really interesting in the way they handle the races. It's all about timing. It's more about timing than just raw speed. So you have to hold left to try and get as much air as you can when you exit a jump, and then you have to rotate your rider to properly land so you don't lose very much speed. There's also this kind of funny thing where if anyone who comes into contact with the rear tire of another racer automatically just falls off the bike, which is really fun to do against NPCs. If you see one coming up behind you, you can just move into their lane and they'll hit your back tire and they'll fall off. So yeah, I think it's a pretty cool play style, and I'm not very good at it, but I mean, just about any of these games, with a little bit of practice, anyone can get good. It's definitely one to look out for if you don't have it already. Coming in at number 2 at $11.50 is probably my favorite NES game of all time, Super Mario 3. This is one of the earliest games that I can remember actually being released. I was 4, I think, when this game came out in 1989. So yeah, I mean, there's not much else I can say that I haven't already said about Mario 3. We've even done a complete Mario 3 playthrough on this channel a long time ago. I mean, it was the All-Stars version of Mario 3, mainly because it has a save feature. And I will say, that is probably the biggest flaw in Mario 3, is that it doesn't have a save feature. This game is way too big to not have a save feature. I mean, you could make the argument that it's like, oh, well, if you know what you're doing, you can get the 2 whistles, you can go straight to 8, World 8, and then you can beat Bowser. But it's like, you're skipping like 80% of the game at that point. Why'd they even make all those levels if you're not even supposed to play them? So, I think if Mario 3 had a save feature, then it would be the perfect game. That's pretty much the only thing holding it back from being a perfect game. The controls are super tight. I think that Mario controls the best in Mario 3 than any other game. I love the plethora of power-ups, from the frog suit to the Tanuki suit and the Hammer Bros suit and just all kinds of stuff, and the feather. The level design is great. A lot of levels have really great verticality, which becomes even more important later in the levels, especially in a lot of the World 7 levels. And yeah, I mean, I got nothing but praise for Mario 3. If you don't have it, then what the hell's wrong with you? Go get it. Finally, coming in at the #1 spot at a whopping $15.44 is Castlevania 2: Simon's Quest, which a lot of people consider the worst, probably the worst Castlevania game. And I gotta say, probably is. But I haven't really played a whole lot of Castlevania games personally. The only one I've ever actually gotten into and played was Castlevania Aria of Sorrow on the Game Boy Advance. And I love that one, because I actually like the style of the Metroidvania Castlevania. The old school style where you can't really save your progress, and it's just really difficult platforming with really clunky controls doesn't really appeal to me all that much. So Castlevania 2 it feels like it was pretty ambitious because it actually has a day-night cycle. It really feels like the night is like twice as long as the day, which is really annoying. But it also has this kind of open world feel. You can go anywhere you want, or anywhere that you have the ability to go to, and it doesn't really hold your hand and give you any direction. The only thing you have to go on is clues that some people in the towns give you, but one of the problems is because of the text limit that they had to work with in this game, some of the clues are really vague and hard to decipher. I will give it props though, because it seems like it's pretty generous with the continues. You still have 3 lives per continue, and once you die all 3 times, basically it's game over. But if you just continue the game, it plops you back down where you were. So I haven't played enough to really get any sort of items, so I don't know if continuing from a game over gets rid of any of your items, because I'm not sure what the full brunt of the penalty is for a game over. But it seems like it's at least, you don't have to start over from the beginning of such a huge game just for losing your 3 lives. But, I mean, it's pretty classic Castlevania controls. It controls nice for what it is. The platforming could be better, I think. But you get what you expect when you play a Castlevania game. I mean, it controls pretty much just like the first game, which I have played a little bit of. The whip controls are nice, but I mean, it's a little too big of a game. I might get into it. I might try and do like some streams of it, where I play it and try to get good and figure out what the hell I'm doing. But I don't see myself playing it for fun very often. But I'm glad to have it in my collection. So there you have it, my top 5 NES games according to value at the time that this was recorded. I did notice, I've tried to record this a couple of times, and because these things are so low value, the order and placement kind of fluctuates. There was a couple when I last tried to record this that aren't even on the list anymore. So yeah, I mean, I hope you were underwhelmed with this. I'm glad you tagged me, Brasel. I'm not going to tag anyone else because I don't really know anyone else who has a big enough NES collection to do this kind of video. So I'm probably behind the times on this video thread anyway, so I'll just let it die with me anyway. I appreciate you watching. I do hope to do more content like this in the future on YouTube, so let me know if you liked it, let me know if you didn't like it. I mean, go easy on me. My ego's tender, it's sensitive. Anyway, I'll catch you guys later. Everybody knows the best thing for when you're doing voiceover work is drink soda between takes. That totally rehydrates your mouth.